Lightning Lee Murray. The legend was born 1977 in November, having a father of Moroccan descent and a mother from England. This is the man Dana White would label a scary son of a bitch, and I don't mean fighter-wise. As a youngster, he grew up with a loving mother, yes, in the trenches and slums of London, but she always said he was a happy kid, and she worked her ass off to give him everything she could. But he would grow up into a tough, troubled youth and join a gang named the Marsh Boys. They would fight to establish the natural pecking order in the young gangs. But friends said even a soaking wet young Lee would go in there at 90 pounds willing to fight anybody, swinging like a madman. I believe one of the biggest changing points of his life is when his father and Lee got into a fight. His father being described as a drunk, volatile man who would abuse and beat Lee and his mom. Finally, Lee had enough and snapped and knocked his dad the fuck out. The feeling of not only knocking a man out bigger, but it's your father, a person you've been terrified for years. Even friends said this is what changed him forever. Now, out of fear for violence, his mother would send him to a troubled youth school for boys, and that's where he would meet his eventual crime partner, Paul Allen. Of course, he was eventually expelled, and he jumped full into the life of crime. He was robbing, selling dope, fighting, having rival wars with another gang called the Nigerian Boys. A friend and a future MMA fighter said Lee would sell a lot of drugs and dope, but his main talent was collecting the money in the most violent ways. After falling in love with the fighting, the dealing, of course, he would face his first consequences and start doing time in a place called the Feltham Youth Offenders Institution, where he would do a couple years and go from a wild, skinny kid to a disciplined savage, 6'3", pure muscle, always hitting the gym. Upon release, he cranked the fuck up with his comrades. Allen and him started using steroids, selling dope, and became entrenched in the gangster lifestyle. It is said they be mocking cops, living wild, not giving a fuck about any consequences. Yet, as we all know, it happens every time. His girlfriend, who he loved at the time, would give birth to his first child. He married her in 2000. They later divorced in 2008, of course, while he was doing his prison bid. But let's go back to 1999, where he was first introduced to his legal documented fight in a promotion that was called the Millennium Brawl, where he would knock motherfuckers out and get his name Lightning Lee Murray for having his quick hands. Now, this is where he fell in love with fighting, and any fighter can relate to this. When you go in there and feel that adrenaline pumping, it's something you can't describe. You just have to know. He took it very serious, they said. He joined a wrestling and boxing gym. And that year he had 4 pro fights, winning some by the Kimura, others by KO, and he would lose a few. But with so much hype and notoriety around his name, promotions were just jockeying to get him. He would eventually travel to the legendary gym in Iowa, the Militich Fighting System, and train with the legendary fighter and coach Matt Hughes, and other future champs. He would fight one of the UFC's GOATs, Anderson the Spider Silva. Yes, he lost by unanimous decision, but with scraps in the UFC and other promotions, his record was 8 wins, 2 losses, and 1 no contest. I feel yet his most famous win was outside of the cage in a street brawl with Tito Ortiz, with others like Chuck Liddell and the announcer Bruce Buffer. This is what his coach Pat
Tito
said
Ortiz
happened.
came running past me, ripping his jacket off, and he was going after Lee Murray. There's Lee Murray backing up, ripping his jacket off. Tito threw 3-punch combination, and Lee Murray ducked out of the way of every punch. And returned fire, threw about a 5-punch combination, and every single punch landed.
Lee put him to sleep. He was sleeping before he hit the floor. And then
Lee was stabbed and almost died outside of a birthday party for some model in London. He lived, but I feel this is what totally put him on the edge. While recovering from his stabbing and visa issues, he would never fight again. So June 2006, allegedly, him and partners dressed as cops took the manager of a cash depot and his family and held them in a white van while they had the manager open the door so they can gain access. While the manager's family was in the van, they rushed the depot holding the manager with AKs and Scorpions, SMGs. All 14 hostages and the family members of the manager were tied up, unharmed, but obviously shaken. After a major investigation, February 2006, Lee's partners were arrested and all of them informed on all involved. Lee fled to Morocco, where he bought a mansion and thought he was in the clear. Yet as we know, too much money, $92 million, no country will forget that. He got arrested in Morocco and he attempted to escape and was snitched on by another inmate, of course. He was also caught with a laptop and 5 kilos of dope. So he was originally sentenced to 10 years, but ended up getting 25 years total for the disciplinary infractions that he caught while in Morocco prison. With a release date of 2032, he's been locked up since 2009. Damn. It's got to be one of the most insane stories I've come across. But while he was in there, he did interviews with Sherdog, even fathered a child. And he says when he gets released, he's still going to train and fight for a super fight. It's unbelievable to think that people look at fighters nowadays as almost these WWF, but you have no idea what people go through, went through, or are currently doing. Some people are so entrenched with one life that by the time they make it out, it's too late. I firmly believe that the stabbing that prevented him from getting over and the visa issues, I feel if he would have stayed in America and trained with Pat, I think he would have truly been a champion in the UFC and left that lifestyle behind. But it's just like when people get released from prison and they go right back to the same people. What happens? Well, this was a recipe for disaster, but always respect for him. Os.